sometimes context is important, where the other boats are. If all the other boats are starting early, you know, and I suppose the OD lets it go, and you're in the middle there, you kind of got to go with the flow, or you're going to be like, you know, if the ODCD decides to, I'll just let it go, then you've got to be part of that bunch. So you have to kind of follow what everyone's doing to a certain extent.
Line bias. People refer to line bias. Effectively, if you've got a line that is perpendicular to the wind, forget there's no tide, let's not concern ourselves with tide on this. It should be that every point on that line is fair. It's got the same distance to get to the windward mark, and there's no bias in terms of wind direction. I don't know which way the best way of doing this is. Let's assume that the wind. What might happen is if the race officer sets a course that's slightly off-centred or skew, there's a bias to this line. Effectively, there's potentially two bias factors. One, there's a distance that's involved. So if that was that way around, you can clearly see the distance from there to there, slightly exaggerated, is less. But also, if you put a boat that's on port and a boat that's on starboard, you can see that actually this boat is going to clearly be over the top. So there's a bias to the line. That's quite exaggerated and certainly shouldn't ever be that way around. Figuring out what the bias is, people do it in different ways. If you pointed the boat head to wind, the boat will point to the bias end. So if you just sailed up to the start line and pointed to the wind, this boat, the bow of the boat pointing towards the committee boat and not from here. So that could be one way of finding out which is the bias end. So you get a feel straight away from it. Rachel was saying earlier, there's other ways of doing it. You can sail along. If you go that way, let's try it and see if we've got different boats with different. If you sail along the line, one boat is going to be closer hauled than the other because of the wind direction. And effectively, what did you say? The boat's going to sail away from the bias end, isn't it? Because this one's going to reach away more.
From fastest is the favourite end. So with your sail down here.
You probably find after a bit of experience, you'll suddenly go, you have a look at it and go, right, I know, my nose can feel which one's the bias end. It comes with a bit more experience, but there are. I would always just go, I'll point it into the wind, and effectively, when you point dead into the wind, you can see that the line is biased one way or the other, and you'll get a feel for which end that you would prefer to start from, bearing in mind that that's all it is. So, and it could be either way. So it might be that it's that end, so it could be a port end bias line. Yeah, fairly straightforward, fairly easy, but that's the principles of that. The key aspect, and if there was no other boat, and this was the way it was, and I wasn't racing against anyone, no one was going to get in my way, I would sit there on starboard and I hit the line there. That's what I would want to do. Perfect start, flat out, gun goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I not hit the committee boat, hit the line just next to the committee boat on starboard. If you can do that, that's great. Aspects for why you want to do that is that if you start introducing other boats, you've got a boat that's underneath you here. Effectively, you've got the best ability of stealing their wind and sailing over the top of them. If you introduce another boat that's doing that on port, I've got right of way over the one that's on port. So effectively, that is the prime position. That's generally why you'll find this part of the start line is really, really busy. Okay? Because people want that position. We'll talk about rules in a minute. And why the committee boat should probably be a rib, so that you can bounce off it and nothing that's too hard. You may find that if you've got a little bit of bias, people will refer to saying, I'm going to go for what's referred to as the port end flyer. So because there's a bit of bias, somebody's going to come in from the opposite end and see if they can sail over the top on port. And people do it, and people have done it here. I've seen people do it. You get away with it. You need a little bit of